back to another edition of Digital Artcast. Thanks again for joining me. It's always a pleasure to have you guys over. Another interview today, and we are talking to someone on the opposite end of the scale where we usually do. We usually talk to people who have had long, illustrious careers and huge kind of catalogues of work. But James, who I recently discovered, or ModernDayJames as people know on YouTube, has decided to come on and talk to us about his career so far, which I think is only spanning, just under or over a year, but also, is super impressive already. Thanks for coming on, James, and welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, man.
Yeah, of course. We've kind of talked about this just before we started recording, but we were talking about, typically when I'm interviewing people on the podcast, Scott Robertson or Matt Rhodes, these guys have had huge careers that span years and have worked on multiple IPs, Mass Effect and whatever else. But you are relatively new to the scene of concept art, but still a name that I have heard talked about at different events I've been to through very professional artists, in fact. It's definitely great that your name is out there. But yeah, so a weird kind of setback to where you started, because I have noticed, kind of digging a little before I started recording, that you were a medical student. Is that right?
Yeah. I was in medical school. So I finished undergrad, went to medical school for a year, and after a year, I was like, I do not want to do this. And
Wow.
yeah, and I had some experience playing music professionally before this, and which is actually how I got into art in the first place.
Cool.
But I figured, you know what? I have some experience doing creative stuff. I've always wanted to work in video games. I'm just going to bite the bullet, quit, tell my parents after I quit, and just get started. And kind of it all took off from there. And by took off, I mean I spent the next year in my parents' basement drawing every day.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that almost kind of correlates back to what got me into art originally, which was idolizing Jim Lee, the comic artist. But he had a very similar story where he was going to medical school because his parents wanted him to. He done life drawing outside of classes to really just relax and do something differently, and then decided he wanted to do art. And then his parents gave him a year basically out of medical school to find a job, and he worked for DC within the year. But yeah, it's a very common thing where a lot of artists I've met around the world have always had stories of, like, me especially, like I used to be an engineer till I was 28.
Yeah.
And then I went back to university to get my degree in 3D animation, and now I'm doing 2D concept. But it was a weird trip along the way, because even 5 years ago when I left my job, like there was no such thing as Learn Squared, or like no one was still kind of like, it was there, but you were ordering DVDs. There wasn't a lot of an online presence, so I had a little information. But it's been a weird journey. But you were the same, right? So you've just been kind of nose down into work the last 12 months.
Yeah, pretty much. And you know what? I think part of why people have a similar story is because when you do decide to quit whatever other career path you're on, you kind of have this fire under your ass where you're like, all right, well, I have to get this in X amount of time. So for me, it was like, well, I got to get a job before. Like I went on leave of absence from medical school. Not, I didn't exactly drop out.
Right.
And I was like, all right, well, my leave of absence expires at this date, so I got to make sure I'm ready to go by that point, which I wasn't.
Wow.
I didn't end up making money in art by that point, but I was like, fuck it, I'm already this far. I'm just going to keep going.
Right.
And
so you're working obviously at Brainstorm just now, but was that your first gig? Was that your first proper kind of job in the industry?
Well, the first thing, the Patreon actually picked up before I started getting, before I got the job at Brainstorm. So I think my Patreon was about $1,200 a month at that point, which was enough to pay rent and move out and do my own sort of thing. Right. And then John hit me up via one of the live streams.
Yep.
He hopped in the chat and just said, "Hey, we're really into what you're doing. If you want to come work with us." And I thought he was joking. Wow. So
is this John Park?
John Park, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought he was kidding. I thought he was just being polite, like offering a job, and I was like, oh, thanks, man. Yeah. But then he emailed me afterwards, and then he offered me the job there. So now I'm working. It's awesome.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's got to be one of the craziest things I've ever heard, is that somebody who I mean, I don't know if you drew before you started drawing properly, but yeah, to go from kind of nothing to a year and then teaching at Brainstorm, I mean, that's a big accolade.
Thank you. Yeah. No, I have been drawing for a lot of my life.
Okay.
Not very well. I mean, I wasn't bad at drawing when I was younger, but I never really studied it. I didn't know you could study it
Right. Yep.
until like when I found Scott Robertson's book right after I left school. Because
Of course.
I hit up YouTube and I was like, all right, if I'm going to draw, what do I need to learn in order to do this right? And I saw Scott Robertson's drawings. So I was like, oh shit, people can do that. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to so many events the last couple of years, and nearly every speaker I've ever listened to always has the same thing of, yeah, I was watching this one day and I was like, oh, I didn't know you could get paid to draw or paint or make sculptures or make, props or do VFX for films. And it seems to be, I don't know why this industry has been so well hidden, but the film game industry has been, not exactly in its infancy the last couple of years. It's been booming since like the 80s. So, I mean, it still kind of blows my mind. But I think it's because in the last 5 years, like a concept artist has become a thing. Like before then, it
Yeah.
was just like the guy in the studio who could draw the best, done the art. There wasn't a specialized job for it, but now there is.
Yeah,
So
and I honestly, even from my standpoint now, working at Brainstorm, it's still somewhat a mystery to me,
right,
and
okay.
it might just be because I don't leave my apartment very often, but but for the most part, it seems to be kind of mysterious. You know, there's NDAs, so they can't really talk about their work too much. They're not allowed to
Yep.
share a lot of their work, um, which is why for me, I kind of have decided to steer clear of concept art for the most part, and I'm just going to do illustration. I think,
Right, okay.
because
Was that a
I'm a
conscious? Oh no, I was just going to ask: is that a conscious decision because there is a lot of concept artists out there, or you just want to focus on something that you enjoy more? Or
It's actually it's two things. So one of the things is I'm a huge blabbermouth, and I know that NDAs are not going to work, especially with my YouTube channel. I'll be like, I'm working on this thing. I'll just like shoot the shit and just end up talking
yeah,
about everything. So I was like, all right, that's a bad idea. One, because I'll probably get sued.
yeah,
Uh, two, I think a lot of my focus is really based in traditional skills, which isn't entirely necessary. Or like I'll spend so much time delving into things that aren't really important for concept art. So
right.
I kind of just decided, hey, listen, if I'm going to spend all this time like working on drawing characters in crazy wide angle lenses, I'm not really going to need to do that for concept art. So I'm not too concerned about that. And like all the stuff that I devote a lot of time to, like mark making and kind of working on my drawing style. It's definitely something that can influence your concept art, but I don't think that's where I want to go. I think illustration is probably where I want to focus.
Yeah, I was going to say because I was at an event not too long ago actually, and I was kind of collecting sketches in a sketchbook of people at the event, and I kind of turned to somebody at the time I knew he was a really good concept artist, and I said to him, "Oh, would you add something to my sketchbook?" And he's like, "Oh, dude, like I don't sketch, like I don't really draw as much. Like it's because of the concept, like I use 3D and photo bashing." And I was like, yeah, that is a thing that is a thing now. If you know what I
Yeah.
mean, like yeah, people can basically get in this industry, and I have seen it very quickly by not using traditional skills and by using stuff like 3D
Yeah.
projection and photo bashing. So yeah, how do you feel about all that? Because I know I used to use that at the start, but now I'm trying to go the way of the purist. Like I'm trying to draw more than a kind of photo bash.
Yeah. Well, I think it's cool. I mean, there's so much stuff that they can do with like there's so much stuff that you can do with all of those tools that you can't do if you're just drawing.
Yep.
Uh, so I think it's 100% necessary, and I think it's really important for people that want to get into the industry to do. But now that I've been offered the opportunity to not have to do that, and I could just draw, I was just like, screw it, I'll just draw all the time.
Yeah, no, I
I'll
mean,
just
and
stick
I
to that.
think I think that's definitely the way I would love to go. I think because particularly I want to do more stylized stuff. So like I would love to
Mhm.
work for Blizzard. That's like the dream job.
Yeah, yeah,
And I know they guys don't use a lot of photo bashing, maybe some 3D obviously, but like a lot of their guys are hardcore illustrators, if you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah.
Like Jumaro Kindred, John Polidori, or who obviously now is at Riot, but they kind of guys live and breathe drawing and sketching, like that is their thing. And yeah, if you want
I
to go that, yeah,
yeah, I do think that if you like what I've noticed in my own art is the more you delve into just pure illustration and you can illustrate in your sketchbook, the faster those ideas will be generated and the more I think the more unique those ideas will be.
yes,
Um And I really do think that's part of one of the reasons why I want to focus on illustration as well, is because once you build up a decent visual library of stuff, you can actually design just by illustrating.
Yeah, definitely. And I think illustration also, like with Scott's books, it does premise more on design because there was a whole talk that Shadi done a couple of years ago where it was like concept art is dead. But what he actually was saying is that what companies need now is not concept artists but concept designers. And I
Yep.
think Brainstorm is as in Scott's kind of legacy. Like they have this similar kind of vibe where it's heavy design focused. I mean, you are illustrating, but your basis is on illustration for maybe entertainment design, industrial design.
Yep.
I take I don't know a ton. I mean, we went to James's talk back in March at IMAG, and he was talking about the school, but he didn't really dive into any kind of great depth. So, what's your kind of day to day at the school? Like, what do you kind of focus on, or what are your things or subjects or environment things that you're kind of teaching day to day?
Sure. So, for me, in my own practice, I'm pretty much focused now entirely on characters, and I have been for the last 6 months. Probably going to do that. I kind of want to do characters in general, or just people in general, as my main focus. So every day, I'll study anatomy, but I'll use there's this tool called Anatomy 360. It's a really great app,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and you can rotate the models and stuff. And I have this breakdown that I've been doing where day one I draw directly from reference. So if, I just started this portrait study, so I'm doing portraits directly from reference. Then I'm doing a portrait, but then I use Anatomy 360 and turn it at all different angles, and then try to do um, the portrait from the photo, but from the angles of Anatomy 360.
right,
Then on the third day, I try to do that same portrait in 360 degrees, but without using Anatomy 360. And then
right,
on the fourth day, I tried to do all of it from memory. So I've been kind of doing that with like all different characters and anatomical features and stuff, and it's been
right.
helping. It's definitely been
Yeah,
helping. It's a bit intense. And then let's see, from my classes, like what I teach, usually I start with working on primitive forms and understanding just how primitive forms work. Uh, Sorry, my cat is now walking over my desk, so it is throwing me off a little bit. He might or she might mess up the microphone.
that's cool.
But yeah, I for the class, I kind of show. I guess a good way to sum up the philosophy is I show how we can understand how to manipulate 3-dimensional forms, and then use those as like the wireframe maquette for a sketch, or like how sculptors use wireframe maquettes and then put clay over it.
Right.
And on top of that, our clay would be like interesting mark making, understanding of anatomy, but all of the structure is coming from knowledge of 3-dimensional forms and primitive forms and that and
Right.
such.
Okay. Yeah. So just kind of the building blocks that would make a character design or would make a character sketch, kind of from start to finish.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really emphasize on trying to be able to sketch characters that already exist before trying to go out of the realm of reality and trying to design your own characters.
Right. Okay. Cool. Cool. And then I take it even down the line. Do you think, um, like, I mean, what would be kind of your ideal position or job? I mean, I know you're working at Brainstorm, but kind of always having a plan down the line. Would there be a company particularly you'd want to work for, or a project you'd want to work on, or do
Well,
you have
to
an
be honest,
idea?
I really like being self-employed, so I'm probably going to do more freelance stuff.
Okay.
But I really want to do Magic the Gathering illustrations,
Cool. Cool.
and I'd like to design some indie games at some point.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I mean, Magic is the hot ticket, right? That's
Oh yeah.
kind of the gold standard for a lot of the guys I know. Like and some guys I know who have just got gigs have been drawn for God years and years before they got anywhere near to getting Magic stuff. It seems to be the highest echelon anyway in terms of
Oh yeah.
illustration.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But yeah, the
I
guy. On you go.
I'm sorry. I was going to say I figure it's going to be a couple of years before it gets to that point.
Yeah, I think it's also a skill I've seen a lot of guys knowing that it's the rendering, right? It's the hardcore rendering that really separates a lot of their stuff from other cards, and also the ability to draw backgrounds as well, or props or kind of like stuff that you kind of need to be a good all rounder. I mean,
Yeah.
you definitely need to be, if you want to do character cards especially, like obviously you need to be solid at characters, but then the whole thing surrounding the character needs to also draw the character out of the card as well. So like in battle scenes or in markets or wandering about, lost lands, there's always an element of a background there. So yeah, it's always people I know who can kind of do everything, that are quite good magic artists. Like, they've done some environments, they've done some props,
Yep.
they've done some characters. So they basically bring all that together in one card, and that's what makes it the solid illustration that it is. I mean, this is speaking from just seeing other people do it. I mean, I've never obviously worked for Wizards of the Coast, and
Yeah.
maybe one day, but I mean, definitely, it's the same though, because I think one of my dreams is also working on the Hearthstone series, like doing cards for Hearthstone, and yeah, the artists who do that are also very similar. They can do solid characters, but also pull a background into the frame as well. So
Yeah, that their artwork is so cool. Hearthstone.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the Hearthstone stuff is definitely. Although I do know people, fun enough, who work on both, but I see it sometimes as weird because I feel Magic has that more realistic edge, where Hearthstone is definitely the more stylized, cartoony stuff. But
Yeah.
I think if you're a good illustrator, you can turn your hand to anything really. I think it's just the rendering style or the proportions that sell the elements you're trying to portray in the card. So
Yeah, exactly. You can just like kind of study exactly what they're doing in terms of their stylization, and then you should be able to do it. I mean, as I say, should be as if it's like super easy, but you should be if you're at that level of one of the artists that's working on those projects.
yeah, definitely. So I mean, just kind of taking our mind back to your career so far, even though it's short, but what was your daily routine? I'm totally not asking this for my own selfish purposes, but yeah. So what was your daily routine? Kind of, I say Monday to Friday, but maybe you're probably working the weekends as well. But were you doing 6 hours a day? Were you doing 8 hours a day? What were you studying? I mean, it'll be hard to break down, obviously, but we've got time.
Yeah.
We've got a while yet, so yeah, just talk at length as much as you feel you can, and maybe break it down to how your days were
Sure.
structured.
So when I first started studying, it was really unstructured, and I kind of didn't know what I was doing. So I just spent so many hours. It was like 13 hours or 14 hours a day, just kind of winging it and just seeing what would happen. That was when I first left school, and I was like, all right, well, I'm putting in these hours. I'm going to get good. And that didn't work so well.
Hmm.
And a lot of my stuff didn't really make any sense. Then I started reading Scott Robertson's book. So I kind of broke it up where I would do that in the morning and then try to design characters or environments and stuff. And again, there really wasn't too much focus to it at that point. Um, then when it really started to get focused was, I'd say 2 years ago. And then I kind of made it a habit where I was posting 4 Instagram sketches per week, and they were all life drawing sketches. So I think I really started to hone my draftsmanship and stuff when I did that for about a year.
Yeah.
And I would go out every day and I would sketch vehicles, environments, people, and I would do it all in pen. The not even ballpoint. I would do it in the like a fine liner pen.
Okay.
And that was really challenging, but once I got comfortable with it, it was really helpful because obviously it worked on so many skills, anatomy, perspective, draftsmanship, all that kind of thing. And I thought it was good because I wasn't trying to really challenge that design muscle too much yet. And I'm still not at this point. I'm still working purely on illustration. And I think it's important to differentiate those two skills as much as you can. So then, yeah, after that, I would say as I was doing that, I started doing YouTube videos, and the YouTube videos were cool because it sort of set up its own schedule because I had this plan of putting out one video per week, which I did for about 7 months. And each time it was like, okay, I pick out a topic. Maybe, I started easy and then gradually got more and more difficult. And those topics would be, as I progressed, those topics would be out of my comfort zone. And so it would require me to study for the first like day or two. Then the third day I would just do film the sketches. Then the fourth day I'd edit it down and do voiceovers and then put it out. And yeah, with that, it was like kind of the professional schedule of the YouTube videos and live streams really dictated what I was doing because, that breakdown is already kind of tough. And then on top of that, I was doing 3 live streams per week, I think, at that point.
Oh, wow.
So it was one YouTube video and then 3 live streams, which were kind of abstract and amorphous. I would do whatever subject popped into my head, I would just start doing. And so that ended up getting a lot of mileage, and it got enough traction that I could start making money off of the ad revenue and from Patreon and stuff. And now I have it. Let's see what my schedule is now. I wake up, got to drink coffee first. That's really important. Then I'll usually do just poses straight from imagination. I'll do them in same thing like a fine liner pen, and I've been getting a little bit more comfortable with that. Then I'll usually pick out a topic. Like this week, it's going to be doing portrait studies. So I'll sketch, like I said before, where I'll sketch directly from reference, then using reference, but turning a 3D model so that way I can try to. I have like the orientation of the character, but I don't have necessarily have the facial features. So that challenges me to like move different curves and see how like certain eye shapes will transform in perspective. Then on the third day, it's doing the same thing, but without the 3D model. And then finally do the whole thing without, just straight from your head.
Okay, yeah, that's intense. I mean, like it does seem like you're talking like it's unstructured, but there does seem a pattern there where you're drawn from life a lot, which I think is something that I definitely missed out when I started. I mean, I was kind of the guy who was like, oh, I can photo bash and I can use 3D, so I don't need to be able to draw. But yeah, like the more you churn out stuff that's sitting in front of you and try to replicate that into a book, then yeah, you start to kind of train your eye, and you then break down forms a lot easier. You start working in perspective.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a thing I would say for anybody listening who is starting that, yeah, drawn from life is like the biggest tip I've had from every artist I've ever spoke to. Everyone
And
is like, yeah, yeah.
everybody always seems to try to skip that step, but I think it's the most important because one, it gives you that intuition of, just seeing stuff and being able to sketch it. Two, you can work on your style more because you're like, if you're already pretty good at drawing from life, the only thing that you're challenging then is how you want to represent that thing, what marks you're going to be making, what sort of strokes, what sort of values you're going to indicate. So right there, that's like a huge advantage to your drawing skills. And then three, you start to pick up on like little tricks and tips. I talked about it in one of my anatomy gumroads, but when I try to draw heads in different perspectives, the way I think about it is like there's this relationship between the position of the eye and the ear, and you can use that as your like your perspective line that'll give you the basically a line going back to your left or right vanishing point depending on the height and the camera, and you start to pick up on these little tricks.
Yeah. You have a kind of like a tool set or an arsenal that you build over time, and you're like, oh yeah, well this is so far from this, and this should be measured as that, and yeah, like, and then obviously you get to a point where you're not even thinking about that stuff; it's just happening. Like your hand is just moving.
Exactly.
Because we talked about one of the guys, Bjorn, that I met at THU, that he does a live stream, I think every day, like a 30-minute warm up thing, and he was talking about I think it was conscious and unconscious learning where like a basketball player will learn to dribble a ball to the point where he dribbles it so well that when he's in the game, he isn't really thinking about what his hands doing. Like it's so natural the movement that he
Exactly.
can then focus on the game. So it's the same with drawing, right? You need to get to a point where you're drawing where you're not even really thinking about does this line go here or does this like you're just doing. You know what I mean? That's the unconscious part of it. Um, and I feel that's somewhere people need to get to before they start approaching design. I feel like it's a very key skill to have is making that pen an extension of your arm, which I think
Yeah.
is the hardest part, but yeah, very essential. Would you agree or?
I 100% agree. And like for me, one of the reasons why I kind of instinctively knew that this was how it should be done was I had started playing music at 5 or 6, so I'm much better at music than I am at art. I still think I kind of suck at art, but with music, like I'm at a position, or at this point, I've been doing it for a decade and a half. I'm at a position where I can kind of pick up a guitar and not think about scales, time signatures, rhythms, any of that, and just start playing. And usually it comes out pretty decent.
Yeah.
So I kind of had a similar approach to that. Pretty much the way I would study was the same as I would do with music.
Yep. And then it's a set routine. If you're doing it every day, then you become better faster, and then you get more creative and inventive. And then once you learn
Yeah.
basic notation, you can start making your own stuff. And it's
Exactly.
very
Exactly.
similar, very
It's
similar to
it's
a musician. Yeah,
identical. It's
yeah.
identical. Identical.
I mean, music in itself is an art form, right? So it obviously then would share some similarities to drawing or painting or any kind of art expression form as well. So yeah, I think that's maybe what helped me in the start as well because I was a drummer by
Oh
design for
shit.
a lot of time. So yeah, so like it was funny actually to teach you. Andre had set up a jam session at night. So after the talks were done, we would go back to the fort and there was a whole kind of setup just ready to go, and people could just pick up instruments and play. So we were spending the nights jamming, and I was on the drums, kind of rocking it hardcore. But then also there's no double kick, so I was like, "Fuck, I can't do any metal."
Oh,
But
you're a
yeah,
metal fan.
yeah, man, I'm a huge
Yes.
metalhead, so yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Wait. Can we just switch gears and turn the whole interview about metal? Because I was in a death metal band for so many years.
Oh shit, really? Would I've heard of them?
Maybe. Painted in Exile. Have you ever heard of that band?
Oh shit, man! Yeah, European in Excel. Oh my god, wow.
I started the band.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
guys, go away now. I'm gonna find out. I'm gonna find out for a couple of seconds. Yeah, like I used to listen to those guys. Oh Jesus Christ, like so much. Oh my god, yeah, that's actually crazy. I cannot believe that.
That's really funny.
Yeah, Revitalize, man, was like my jam
I
for.
wrote that.
Jesus Christ. Okay, guys, this interview has taken a fucking turn. By the way, everybody go away. I need to speak to James for like half an hour just about how awesome this band was. Oh my god, we heard about Fate in Exile. God, how long ago was that? I'm talking maybe 3-4 years ago. I think I was listening to you guys like
That's awesome.
regularly, and yeah. But I mean, you kind of have you been doing stuff recently? Because I haven't heard of you guys for a while, right? That's that. Have you guys? Are you still?
So here's what happened. So I wrote I say I wrote. I did write a majority of the first two things that they put out. There was initial EP, and then there was Revitalized.
Okay.
And then after that, I left to go to school because I was doing the whole doctor path thing, and it was another crossroads in my life where I had to decide whether or not I was going to pursue music or pursue medicine. And I think I might have made the wrong choice there because I loved playing metal. But either way, so
Yeah.
I ended up doing that. And then they actually recently put out an album in 2016, which is fucking awesome. I had nothing to do with it, but it's amazing. I listen to it all the time.
Yeah, the band was definitely different because I remember the first time I listened to them, it's like, is that a jazz like instrumental? And like
Yep.
3 minutes into this breakdown, like what the fuck is going on? But oh my god, that's actually crazy. You know, I've met so many people within this art form where a lot of them did have bands on the side. There was one of the guys, Steve Corman, actually, who just done matte painting at ILM. He worked in a couple of different movies and stuff, but he was in a band that was like touring the world at one point. He was playing in Tokyo and stuff. He was a drummer.
That's awesome.
And but he was the same, right? He didn't want to. I mean, I'm not particular in his words, but I can understand the gist he was getting of is that you live your life in the back of a van, you don't earn a lot of money. It's a very kind of up and down career. So he was like, yeah, I just want to get something that has a bit more stability.
It's definitely hard to monetize it. I mean, we were able to, and like we played a lot of shows and stuff. But in terms of making a career out of it, it's a lot harder, I think.
Yeah, I would say even, I mean, Scott actually talked about this in one of his ArtStation interviews where people were talking about, they're like, oh yeah, there's so many concept artists and the industry is so saturated right now, it's impossible to get a job. And he's like, this industry is just starting. I mean, like, look at the music industry, like talk about saturation. Like, there's a million people out there that want to be musicians more than artists. And yeah, people can now complain that, oh yeah, there's not enough jobs. It's like you just need to be good enough, like to get work.
Yeah.
But there isn't.
Yeah,
there's not a shortage. It's just that there's a bit more level of dedication. But yeah, music is, I would definitely say, a lot harder than this industry to get work.
It is, but I will say, playing a live show is a lot more satisfying than anything I've ever had in art.
Dude, we were on that stage at THU and we were absolutely loving it. Like I hadn't played live in years in front of a crowd and it was great.
Yeah.
You always have that bug, I think. Once you've played live, you always want to go back and do it. We're trying to get a band together for next year, like because the whole thing was people were going up randomly at THU and they were just picking up instruments and trying to play something, and then we were obviously trying to be like, oh, okay, what's he playing? I can maybe play along to that, and it was the simple stuff. It wasn't anything too complex. But we need to try and get a more structured approach next year because it eventually worked out because people would eventually get in a rhythm or somebody would play like a couple of chords that were like decent so you could play along to it. But yeah, it was getting to a point people were just messing up or people were walking off stage or they're playing something for 2 minutes and forgetting the rest of it, and I was like, oh god. So we're trying to do that as well. I don't know if you've heard of Trojan Horse Was a Unicorn. Have you heard of that at all? Or
I think I may have. Is it a band or is it an event?
God, it could be both. But yeah, but no. So THU is an event that was started in Troia in Portugal by a guy called Andre, and it was basically trying to bring some of the biggest artists in the world together to do talks and demonstrations. Um, and yeah, he's run it now for I think since 2013, so like 5 years.
Awesome.
And yeah, we had some amazing speakers this year. We had Corey Loftus, we had Ryan Lang, Raphael Grassetti, Frank Song, a lot of guys, like big guys from industry, especially like Corey Loftus and Ryan Lang. They're Viz Dev guys working in Disney. They worked in Frozen, Wreck-It Ralph,
Oh wow.
and then Ryan went another way actually after he worked in Wreck-It Ralph and stuff. He went to work for Marvel doing like Avenger stuff, comic book stuff. So he actually was telling us he just finished working on the next part of the Avengers, like the Avengers Part 2, the Infinity War thing, the conclusion.
Awesome.
So, but he couldn't talk about anything because he was like, yeah, it's all under NDA. And I can't show anything.
It was a silent talk. They just sat there and stared at the audience.
Yeah. I think he showed us some of the stuff he'd done on Doctor Strange. I think Doctor Strange was the first thing he worked on for Marvel.
Oh, sick. Cool.
So showing some of the designs he'd done with Carlo Ortiz, like a lot of the early production stuff before they started filming. But yeah, there was a lot of huge speakers, a real sense of family. They call it the tribe. So if you become a THU, you become a warrior, you become part of the tribe. And it's kind of like a whole like family thing to do with like, you're part of something bigger. But definitely one of the better events I've been to. I think Europe is kind of leading the way in a lot of those kind of events, whereas America doesn't have really a ton of them. I know there's a Luxicon, which I think's out of Philly, but it's more for fine artists or oil painters. And then the only thing I know about in Canada is Edge Control, which I think is one of the more popular ones. But yeah, there's not a ton of those kind of things. Unless no one hosts something, then yeah, there isn't a ton of big events with lots of speakers you can go to in the States.
Yeah, it seems usually like that. Like you said, it's mostly in Europe. I don't know. I mean, I also wouldn't know because, like I said, I don't leave. So,
yeah.
I don't usually go to events or anything. I'm just like hanging out, doing my own thing most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say even because we're kind of like, I mean, you're obviously definitely ahead of me in technical skill, but I feel like the going to events and mixing with people, even with big artists, it has definitely forwarded my career so much. Just to be able to speak to those guys and have a conversation with professionals about like how you should be learning or ways to approach stuff, and then obviously getting feedback. But then you will have an extent of that, obviously, because you're working with James and John, so like they are obviously experts in their field. So, but if you spoke to James about IMAG, going to Paris and stuff and talking, he would probably tell you, yeah, it was a great experience. And
I'm sure, yeah. It's cool being at Brainstorm too. I always like Jonathan Kuo. I'm not sure if you're aware of him.
Okay.
He's an amazing concept artist. I mean, he teaches right after me, or he was teaching right after me on Saturdays last semester. Right. And I would just sit down with him after class and talk to him, and he would just show me all the stuff that he was working on or teaching. And he was the most humble person about it too. It was funny. I was like, "Oh, do you mind if I sit in your class? Looks really cool." He teaches the form language class. And he's like, "Oh, I'll have to work on my chops or my technical skill." I'm like, "No, like you're so good. What are you talking about?" I'm like, "You're literally showing me work that you did for Transformers. What are you?"
Oh man, we had the exact same thing every talk I've ever been to. In fact, just recently, obviously, we're sitting looking at Ryan's talk. Ryan's worked on all this kind of stuff like Frozen and Wreck-It Ralph and Big Hero 6, and then he worked on the Marvel stuff, Doctor Strange, all this kind of shit. And he was going like every time he was showing a piece, he was like, "Yeah, I wasn't really happy with this thing, and I don't like this one. This wasn't good at all. And if I had more time," and we were sitting there like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like this stuff is incredible." And then Corey Loftus, who has worked, in such amazing, like he was one of the lead guys in Zootopia, and he was showing us some Viz Dev stuff they were doing for that. And I was like, the detail this guy goes into, like, they would, like, down to, like, every button and badge the characters would wear had a meaning, like, for the character. Even when they made the currency, Corey was talking about, it was an in-joke with two of the guys, because there was a stag on, like, on the money, like, with antlers, and he was, like, the president, like, the money white, like, even designing the money, but it was a joke because he was, like, his $1. So...
That's pretty good.
Yeah, but we were like, it's like he took that attention to detail and everything he made for the characters, and I was like, Jesus wept. But that's Viz Dev, right? And that's what makes Corey's stuff like incredible. But then even he was like, "Oh yeah, I left some shitty sketches in here, the ones I didn't like," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Corey,
I think that's just a symptom of being an artist. You always just like everything you do, you're just like, "Oh, that's the worst I've ever seen. It's terrible."
Yeah, I mean, it was the same with Scott Robertson, right? When I interviewed him, he was like, I was saying like, oh, I'm getting to interview one of my heroes today, and Scott was like, oh, I don't know if I can live up to that. That sounds like a lot to take. And I'm like, you're Scott fucking Robertson, man. Like, you
Yeah.
invented concept art. Like, I mean, you're one of the OG like concept
Yeah.
artists, and he was like, oh yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, these guys are never. I've never met anybody really with an ego in this industry. Um,
Yeah. I think part of it is that in order to get better, you have to be really self-critical. And when you're really self-critical, it makes you really embarrassed.
Yeah, because you obviously look at somebody else that's always above you, and then you're kind of like, well, my artwork isn't good as this guy's, so it
Yeah.
must not be perfect yet. And yeah, in a way, it's a good and bad thing. Like, I love the fact that it makes people humble. It makes people want to learn more. It makes people, engage in teaching and want to give back. But at the same time, it also then takes people's kind of self-esteem away and makes people very doubtful of what they're doing, or
Yeah.
unsure, or very confident to apply for positions they really could work, they could do, but they don't really feel like they can. And yeah, it's definitely a double edged sword, more so than most things I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
it sucks. But then yeah, like you said, it means when you're talking to some of your heroes, like I mean, obviously when John was messaging you on your live stream, you must have been like, holy shit. And then
Yeah,
when
I
you're
thought that
talking
was
to
crazy. I still think
yeah.
I suck though. for me, I get the confidence and sort of arrogance, for lack of a better word,
Yeah,
from my work ethic and from I guess from music. Now that I've stepped away from it, I can kind of be like, oh, I guess I was pretty good.
yeah.
So I just kind of rely on that for like building up my ego enough to the point where I'm not really sad. And then I'm willing to just do art and be like, wow, that's terrible, that's terrible, that's terrible. But at least I can still play music.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, what a fucking ton of events, man. Like, I cannot believe you were paid in Excel. That is actually crazy. Because usually when you say to people, like, oh, I was in a band, you're like, oh, yeah, would have heard of them. And then they'll say it, right? And you'll be like, oh, no, I don't think I've heard
Yeah.
your stuff. But yeah, that's probably awesome. But then you're like, no, I was in this band. I was like, the band I have been listening to for years. And I was like, holy shit. Like,
That makes me very happy. I'm really glad about that,
yeah,
man.
man. Oh, no, Painted were. I mean, you know yourself. Like, you guys were always kind of super popular even at the start because it was so different the things you were doing with syncopation and time structures and the way you were playing different genres in one song. Like, you were doing a lot
It
of
was
things that people weren't doing at the time.
Yeah, talk about overnight. That was like I think nothing has felt as surreal as that, because before we put out that album, it was like kind of, really slow online and not too much. And then I remember we put up the album, and at that point in time we were working on MySpace as our social media, and we had like MySpace bots adding people. And I remember by the morning after we put out Revitalized, we had 200,000 listens and like so many album sales. It was ridiculous.
Wow.
And I haven't had any feeling quite like that in a very long time, but it was something, I got to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the first one was even revitalized. Listen to. I think my friend let me listen to Skylines. Like, that was
Yep.
the kind of first thing, and my God, I mean, like, yeah, some of the breakdowns in that were just, I mean, as a metal fan, obviously, you love this kind of stuff, but I think there was two bands at the time I was listening to because I was getting in heavier and heavier stuff, and I think one was you guys, and the other was Within the Ruins, and
Oh yeah, we played with them.
oh,
Yeah, we played. Can I tell you about the Within the Ruin show just for a moment?
okay,
So the Within the Ruin show that we played was 4 states away,
wow,
and I had class that morning, so I left class to drive 4 states away. I show up as 5 minutes into our set, or like into our setup time, and I realized like my whole band had set up my amplifier and everything, and I
right,
realized I had forgotten a guitar strap.
oh wow,
So I played the entire set sitting down, headbanging in this theater. It was like the most
oh my God.
stupid thing I've ever done, but it was a ton of fun. And then Within the Ruins came on afterwards, and they fucking killed it. It was so good.
As always, yeah. I mean, I definitely. I think even recently. Sorry, guys that are listening to this podcast about art that we're talking about metal, but like,
I keep derailing it. I'm sorry. It's my fault.
it's fine. No, it's totally fine. But recently, because I've had a total change in members, I just got into is it Chelsea Grin?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They
and
killed somebody, so they had to get some new members. They
okay.
didn't actually kill anybody.
No, it was. I think that, yeah, their singer had problems with substances. I think he was on the road to recovery, so they kind of dropped a lot of guys, and now there's only four of them. There's a guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, and the singer. Um, with the new direction, I don't know if you've heard the song "Hostage" that they put out. But yeah,
No, I
that's
don't think
like,
I heard it.
oh man, you have to get a listen. It's very I say beat downy. Like it's kind of like what Amure have been doing for a while.
Okay,
Very
yeah.
beat down heavy, very single note orientated. But yeah, their new stuff is the new album is really really good. Like because I went in a different direction since they changed members, but yeah, I've been really getting into them. But Within the Ruins, yeah, they're OG. Like yeah, I remember. I think was it them or I can't remember. They played a show in Glasgow, just close to where I'm in Scotland, and yeah, there was the promoter who handled it was really terrible, and I think they played to
As
like
they always are.
yeah, totally, and I think they played to six people, and we were kind of standing there like, what the fuck,
Oh
like
my god.
what's Within the Ruins, man? They should
See,
like the place should be full, yeah.
that's why I don't do music professionally anymore. Because you get shit like that. You'll play a show, you're like, all right, we sold out to like 600 people. Then you play the next show, and then there's 10 people there. You're like, what the fuck is my life?
Yeah,
It was so
you're
terrible.
playing to like the other bands and their girlfriends. Like it's a very
Yeah,
common thing.
yeah,
And yeah, like yeah. I mean, I've listened to so many bands over the years that have came and went, and the industry's been so fickle, and it kind of takes people out and takes people in and spits them out. And I mean, there's been so many, even just people just lost their life. I mean, I remember one of the biggest regrets I ever had was I missed seeing Suicide Silence
oh
download
yeah,
of 2011, and that was I think it was only a couple of months after that Mitch died basically in his accident. Um, and yeah, and like obviously Chester, like I never got a chance to see Linkin Park
yep.
either, and he's gone now as well. But yeah, it seems to be a very similar thing where people in a lot of art forms, including music, have spouts of depression and not feeling like they're good
Yep.
enough.
And I think with music, you have this exceptional highs and lows because your fan base is so, like you said, fickle, where it's like you'll have a huge audience and then maybe 2 years later you don't.
Oh yeah,
And
like
so,
you walk on a stage and play in front of like maybe 2,000, 3,000 people, and then you play like to five. Yeah, so
yeah,
it's
it's so much less consistent than art. And to get back to art, that's one of the benefits. So anybody that's concerned about, not having, there not being enough positions in the concept art industry or anything like that,
yeah.
at least you're not playing music professionally.
Oh god, yeah, yeah. And then even stuff like session musician playing, like if you're going to go down that route, that's almost even harder. Like because for session musician work, you need to be like, I mean, talking like beyond good. Like you need to be
Yeah, you
walking
got to
in
be
now.
spot on.
Yeah, I like sight reading. Like you're putting a sheet of music in front of somebody, and they're just like, okay,
Yep.
cool, playing. And yeah, like there's no kind of where near that kind of stuff as there is within art. So yeah, so interesting. That was an awesome wee trip down memory lane of music, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, bringing it back around. So yeah, so you're still illustrating, you're still working at Brainstorm. Um, you're doing your classes. Is there a project on the horizon that you're looking to work on, or are you just kind of like is your focus mainly just on Brainstorm at the moment?
So on the horizon, I have two books that I'm going to be putting out. The first one is an instructional on how to like go about breaking down the visual world in the way that I do, and like kind of learning to use primitive forms in conjunction with good line work. I'm hoping for it to be like a good compendium to how to draw, or like it covers a lot more than a lot different stuff than how to draw does. I don't want to say a lot more.
Right.
I have it all written out, but there's a lot of illustrations that need to be redone. So it's been delaying the process quite a bit. Um, and then after that, next year, I want to put out just a printed book of sketches.
Right. Okay.
But I want to
Yeah.
do them all traditionally and stuff, and no digital sketches in it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that sounds super interesting, and I think it's interesting as well because, I mean, I know people used to say to Feng when they're talking about him putting out a book, and he was like, "Well, like I learned off Scott, and I think he set the gold standard for doing books, so I don't think there's any point." But I think it would be interesting for people to see a variation in Scott's book, maybe even interpreted by another person, because like not everybody can think like Scott. Like I know obviously Scott is a genius and what he does is incredible, but um, sometimes you'd almost want I'm not going to say a dumbed down version, but like something where he isn't going as technically high,
Yeah,
and something that maybe eases the breakdown process of characters, and especially with characters, because I mean Scott's
yeah,
focus is most on industrial design, so he would be more centric on vehicles and tanks and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Like,
Mine's more focused on positioning characters, posing characters. Like there's two chapters that are on breaking down the human anatomy into primitive forms, and then using primitives on how to pose them in different types of poses. So it's chapter 6. It goes into all different poses from like running, walking, sitting, jumping, all that stuff, and how you can break that down. So it's definitely a lot different. And the second third of the book is all on mark making and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of I've actually, as I was writing it, I had how to draw next to me to make sure that I wasn't covering any of the same stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So it's definitely a book that will have the same level of like perspective focus, but definitely a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think even just a different take on Scott's subject matter would be interesting to see because, yeah, like I said, as much as he's done industrial stuff, the character stuff has been very light, and I haven't seen. I mean, like whenever I talk about character design or doing, study of heads or anatomy, people always point me to the same kind of resources people have for a lot of times. So you'll get guys like Andrew Loomis, like he seems to be the kind of go-to for anatomy, for drawing the head and hands, and Bridgman, another one that kind of has been.
I was
around
just about
for a while.
to say Bridgman. Bridgman is the best. It's so good.
Would you? That's interesting, actually. Would you rate him above Andrew Loomis, or do you think Andrew Loomis's stuff is a bit more technical, or how would you kind of compare the two?
I think I like Bridgman better, but I think Andrew Loomis is easier to read, and I think it seems to be a lot more easy for people who haven't drawn very much to get into.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, that was another book that I started out with when I first started drawing. I think it's a little bit easier, and you can go back to Andrew Loomis's book, and there's some things that I was doing, and I was like, oh wow, look, I came up with this method of doing something, and then I go back to Andrew Loomis's figure drawing for all it's worth, and I'm like, oh shit, he was doing this so long ago.
Yeah. But it's so solid, right? That those things. It's the same with Scott's book. I mean, Scott's book was put out so long ago now, in comparison to where we are now. But it's still like the gold standard for people learning how to do design.
Yeah.
So if you do it well, people will obviously come back to that stuff. I mean, it was a weird thing I found within gaming where Shigeru Miyamoto was talking about, like, if a game is delayed, it's only shitty for a couple of months where you have to wait for it. But if the game is bad, it's bad forever. So if you take that time and make that thing great, like you're doing with your book, then hopefully it's something that 10 years people could be saying, oh, look at James's book, and you go back to this is really good for characters. And it's always the thing you hope is that people, and I mean, your name is getting out there definitely. Like I have heard from so many people, they were like, oh, have you checked out ModernDayJames? His YouTube channel's really coming along, and there's a lot of good stuff on there, and he's got a really awesome Gumroad. So yeah, I mean, you're definitely doing the right things. Yeah, must be great. Because I think yeah.
I was going to say it's interesting because I don't see too much of it because like I said, I don't really like, I don't do any fan meetups or anything like that. But I did have somebody stop me on the street the other day for the first time, and that was weird.
Wow. I mean, like, yeah, that must be interesting. I mean, the only time I ever had that was at Industry Workshops a couple of weeks ago in London, and one of the artists came along at the nighttime thing. We were all kind of having a drink and talking to each other.
Yeah.
She was like, oh, you're Gordon. I was like, yeah. She's like, I love your podcast, by the way. Like, it really inspires me. And I was like, holy shit, and then I've had like an email from somebody who like is going to school to study concept design because of my podcast. Like those kind of things.
That's awesome.
Like you kind of sit there and all you can really say is like, thank you. But yeah, you don't know how to take that kind of compliment stuff, and you're kind of like, well, I must be doing. I think in any way it's a good validation because you feel so down a lot of time, like, oh, my skill isn't good enough, or I could be better at drawing. But when somebody has those validation points, like, oh, you really inspire me, or I really love your work, then you're kind of like, okay, like I'm doing something that must be interesting. Yeah, so
definitely.
Yeah, that must be a big thing. And yeah, like I think one of the videos I saw before people were talking about you was it was like, oh, I'm trying to remember. It was a channel on YouTube where the guy goes around Comic Con artists and he gets them to draw different
that's
stuff.
Proko's video.
Okay, right, yeah. So that was the last thing I saw you in was when he got you to draw.
My sketch was terrible.
Yeah,
my sketch was awful.
It was a guy with a big weapon or something, a kind of fat guy or something.
I hate that sketch. I had just walked 3 miles because I couldn't get a taxi to Comic-Con.
Oh, God.
And then I was dying in sweat, and then he had me sketch. I was just like, oh no. I thought I was going for an interview. I didn't realize he was going to have me sketch. Oh, it's not a good sketch, and I'm very disappointed.
Oh, it's all good. Yeah. Well, you're as good as your last sketch. That's what they say, isn't it? So,
Well,
yeah, that's
check the YouTube channel and the others and the Instagrams for better sketches. That was not a good one, and I saw it. I was like, oh no, I can't believe you put that up there. But thank
yeah,
you, Proco, for having me anyway. I appreciate it.
yeah. No,
Just
I think
embarrassing.
I've watched a couple of his stuff over the years because actually when I initially left my job, I wanted to get into comics. Like that was my kind of first thing I wanted to do. But then I learned how little comic artists make. Like it's embarrassing, like how little they get paid for such amazing work, and that's probably why some of the biggest guys have went to animation now because it's so much better paid. They can actually have a life.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, the I used to watch a lot of the guys like Jim Lee and Alvin Lee, and all the guys, doing signings or doing commissions and drawing Batman on the covers and stuff. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do that one day. And yeah, they can just learn that you're going to struggle forever because yeah, even if you get a job in a smaller company and a games company, you're going to earn like a livable wage. But if you're an independent artist working on a small publisher, you're not going to make a lot of money. I remember guys tell me that they were doing like an issue of Spider-Man over 1 year, and they were getting maybe 8,000 bucks for the year.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's not good at all. No
no,
offense.
yeah,
No offense to them. That's rough.
yeah, oh no, totally, and that's why I'm saying a lot of the guys will now get into game design or into viz dev or into animation because the paychecks are, and like nobody obviously does this for the money, but you want to be able to do stuff like have a home, eat, go out.
you want to you want to be able to pay rent and eat food, which is
Yeah,
not something to complain about.
no,
Some
no,
people are like,
definitely.
"Oh, you're just in it for the money." It's like, no, I just want to
No,
eat. I'm
yeah,
hungry.
I want to live like everybody else. Especially I know
Yeah,
like a lot of guys I know who want to have families one day, and raising a kid is expensive enough. But on 8,000 bucks a year, you cannot do that. So like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
need to think long term. Like, how am I going to do this? So yeah, it's
I've
interesting.
found that monetizing like through because now I have the pretty large YouTube channel and the Gumroad and everything.
Mhm.
That has really helped. It's been great because like I can kind of expand into whatever avenue I want because there's a kind of a dedicated audience that will watch whatever I put out.
Mhm.
So like through live streaming, I get ad revenue. Through the YouTube channel, I get ad revenue, and then that markets the Patreon and the Gumroad and stuff. And I'm even going to put out some more music, so maybe hopefully some of those audiences will or that audience will overlap a little bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it's kind of cool. It feels very freeing to be able to kind of do what I want and not really have too much pressure monetarily.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's something I think I had looked into initially because I think when I was starting out and learning a lot of concept stuff, Sakime-chan was like just starting on Patreon, and she now obviously earns an absolute fortune on Patreon. I think the last time I looked at it was about 50 grand a month, which was,
Damn.
yeah, incredible. But then she had built a huge audience for years and years, and then when they came to Patreon, it was all just kind of at once it exploded. But yeah, I would love to be in a position where I could just kind of pick and choose my hours, and although people kind of understand that it's still work, right? Like you're not sitting playing video games all day. Like you still have to
No,
be putting out content and working on your
it's
skill
also a
set. And
double-edged sword
yeah, definitely,
because
because you get
because
free time, but you have to manage that time.
yeah, and then you like you'll have moments where you're doing something to relax and they're like, "Oh shit, if I don't put this out in X amount of hours or days, people are going to not get their patron perks or they'll quit." Like I just changed my I just changed my Patreon settings or my one of my perks
Yep.
for the Gumroads so that they're actually getting half the amount of content per month.
Right.
Um, just because it was unmanageable at the level I had it.
Right.
Um, and so I lost a decent amount of subscribers from that.
Right.
So even that is a little bit stressful, but like at the same time, you kind of have to, you know,
Be
do what's best for
realistic.
you.
Yeah, definitely. I have found that people will look at some examples of patrons that are super successful, and even guys like Jama and a couple of the guys I know who are content artists, and people would look at that sometimes and say, "Oh no, it doesn't seem like a lot for $10 a month." But then they're usually doing this on top of a full time job. Like I know Jama is working at ILM, so I mean, like he has to balance working a full time job there plus doing the patron stuff. So yeah, you can't be too overzealous with your
Yeah.
time because then yeah,
Yeah.
people just expect way too much of you, and yeah, then you get burnt out, and and again, you're new to the industry as well, so it's stuff you learn as you go, and I definitely feel like Although it's kind of funny actually. My experience is like the polar opposite of most people, right? I'm super good at networking. I know a ton about the industry and all the players in it, but my
Yeah,
technical skill is super low. Like I can draw to an extent, but not as good as I should be able to. But after 2 years anyway, and that's because I think it took me so long to find what I wanted to do. Because I was like,
okay.
yeah, like if I do, super realistic, gritty stuff, I'll get a job here, or if I'm like this artist, I'll get a job here. And then people just, I think it was only 6 months ago, someone had a sit down with me and was like, man, just, draw whatever the fuck you want. Like, if you want to draw Blizzard style awesome illustrations without using 3D or photo bashing, then like do it. You know what I mean? There's always going to be a market for your type of art. Don't draw
That's true, man.
don't draw what you think people want to see. Draw what you want to do. So yeah, I take it that's something you would say that's the same with you. Like,
A
definitely draw
hundred
what you.
percent.
Yeah, and is that something you pass on to like your students as well? Do you feel like they feel the pressure of like I need to draw like this or I need to have a portfolio that
Yeah,
looks like
yeah.
yeah,
Because I mean, think about it. Like, especially for me coming from music, I had never wrote music for anybody else to listen to other than myself,
okay, yeah,
and that for me had a really good result in my life. I think if you try to do something for somebody else, you're always going to end up being a worse copy of that other person. And that doesn't mean to not take influence from other people. Like, you can take influence from Blizzard artists, you can take influence from wherever,
yeah,
but at some point you just have to do whatever it is you want to see.
yeah.
And that's really the only thing that's going to keep you motivated.
Yeah, I would definitely say that, especially if you want to do this at like 8 hour a week job or whatever you're working. Like if you don't love it, then you will quickly get burnt out. And then also, I think it also is new to people who don't understand how long it takes to get good. I mean, like if you're on your level of dedication, obviously you can get good pretty quick, but like it can take years for people to get established. And
It takes forever, man. It takes a
yeah,
really long time.
it's a lifelong goal, right? There's guys who I know who have been
Yeah.
drawing for 20 years and they're still unhappy with their style. So it's not like a job where you can walk out of university and a 9 to 5 and you're kind of proficient at within 6 months. Like
No, it's going to
yeah,
take forever. I mean, even with we were just talking about the music before. With Revitalized, I put that out I think 11 or 12 years after I had started playing guitar. So it
yeah,
took that long to get that. And after I released it, I found about 1,000 things I didn't like about it.
right,
And so you're always going to have this, this loop of, you know, you'll get maybe more praise from people, but you're always going to have that loop where you're like, oh, that's not good enough. I need to improve.
yep,
And you can't just expect that within your first couple of years of drawing, or if you're really young, that you're just
yeah,
going to,
yeah.
you know,
I mean, I definitely say to
start
people
working.
like, yeah, don't feel like disheartened again. Like I always say to people is that I mean, there's a level you can get to where you'll get work. Don't get me wrong. Like if you get to a certain level, you will get paid for it, but you'll still not be at the Blizzard style level of illustration. You might get to work for an indie dev, or like me, like or working for a small mobile games company. But um, yeah, you don't have to. It's not like you have to like. You could never get a job unless you've been drawing for 5 years. Like within like maybe a year or 2 years, if you're dedicated enough, you could find work somewhere.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, if you want to start, rolling with the big players like Blizzard, like EA, like Ubisoft, all these kind of guys, like yeah, then that's a bit further down the line for a lot of people. That's 4 or 5 years into your career, you can start thinking about making that step into the big leagues.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's a lifelong endeavor, and you got to enjoy it and not be too hard on yourself if you're not where you want to be.
yeah,
I know for me, like, I'm nowhere near where I want to be, and it's kind of embarrassing too, because then I put so much stuff online and I have people looking at it and be judging it or whatever.
yeah.
Uh, but also, you know what? You just have to take solace in the fact that you're just going to keep getting better the amount, as you keep putting in more and more hours.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's not like you're trying to teach industry professionals how to draw. Like you're teaching students, you're teaching hobbyists, enthusiasts, you're teaching people definitely who are below your level. But like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
there's always a like I go back and teach occasionally, and yeah, I'm not teaching these guys anything like super technical or super advanced. But I'm to a student who's just started university, like I can teach them some fundamentals and basics that I learned, that I'm, decent at, that I can then pass on to them. So yeah, you can always give back to somebody at some level. You don't have to be at a certain level to teach. But again, you're at Brainstorm as well, so that's also a great thing because that is a high echelon of teaching. So yeah, it's great that John obviously recognised that striving you to do stuff, and yeah, it's got to be an awesome thing because obviously you have that income, obviously on top of your Patreon stuff and your YouTube stuff. So it's definitely going to be helping you out
Yeah. Oh
financially.
yeah, it's super nice.
Yeah. So kind of just to round it off, like with your Patreon, especially, because I don't know a ton about it either, and I'm actually thinking about signing up to it. So, for me, and everybody else that might want to take part in your Patreon, what do you offer? Is it teaching based? Is it every month you get something to help you
There's
with?
a couple things.
Okay,
It's
okay,
actually I not to boast, but it's pretty freaking awesome for the price. So for $2, you get the archive of live streams, which I do a ton of them, so you can watch them all back. For $5, you get the Gumroad. It'll be one Gumroad per month at this point, but you'll get it at a discounted price, and you'll get the live streams.
right, okay,
For $8, you get a critique of 2 pieces of artwork every month. For $30, you can get group lessons, which are super awesome. We have 2 group lesson tracks, one that's dedicated to doing characters and anatomy, and the other one that's dedicated to doing vehicles and man-made objects. And every week we meet up. So each month we'll meet up 4 times for 2 lessons and 2 critiques, and those are for an hour each. And that's pretty awesome. It works out like I think it works out to being $8 a lesson.
wow,
And it benefits me a lot, and it benefits the students. Then $60 you can access both of those, and then the prices start to get steep for the mentorship. It's $200 for per month for 2 lessons, and then $400 for 4 lessons.
right, okay, and that's a more one-to-one thing. That's like you sitting in front of somebody, like one-to-one time, talking to them about their
Yep.
art.
That's one-on-one plus everything behind it, so they can join the group lessons as well.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It seems very reasonable. I mean, definitely for skill level. I mean, I know Darek Zabrowski was doing similar things, but he was charging a lot more. But then Darek is an incredible artist to start with. Like he does, he works in everything. He's worked in Destiny 2 not long ago. So yeah, definitely reasonable. But then you've got the Gumroad as well, which obviously is more like if you want to just have like a bite of your teaching, you can just take some individual lessons. It doesn't have to be like the full thing because you have like Gumroads on anatomy, on lighting, rendering, that kind of stuff. So you can, if you want to break it down further and you didn't want to be doing the monthly thing or the larger amounts, then you can just take a chunk of your Gumroad stuff and
Yeah,
learn
exactly.
from.
And I usually put them up for pretty cheap. They will be going up in price a little bit now that I've lowered that I've changed the Patreon settings, but it'll be like $7 per Gumroad for the most part,
Which is very reasonable for getting teaching methods. I mean, like people complain sometimes about how expensive online learning is, but I mean, there's some schools that charge. I nearly named some of them, but yeah, there's some schools that charge a lot of money to go to their schools, and yeah, $7 for a kind of practically a whole course on one subject is not a lot of money. So yeah, it's
Thanks.
very reasonable. I think even there's a real good. Have you heard of Focal Point School by a chance? I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
No, I haven't actually.
So Focal Point is a school that Darek Zabrowski has started in Poland, and Darek is teaching with I think one of the guys he's worked with on films and games, and they do some really good courses. I think similar to Brainstorm because James had a similar thing when he's talking about in iMag that they were trying to build a school that was very reasonably priced for what they were teaching. And Darek does a course. I think it's maybe 6 weeks worth of teaching. I think it's 3 days a week. You do classroom stuff, and then you have homework. But I think it's something like £1,500. Well, the equivalent to £1,400 for 6 weeks training, which I think is very reasonable.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of schools I know that charge thousands, like tens of thousands, to do some courses and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a good alternative. I think you guys are the same with Brainstorm, right? You're very competitively priced. Like you're not charging.
It's $800 for 10 weeks, so it's pretty solid.
Yeah, and how many days teaching is that? Or like how many days would you be in the classroom?
It's 1 day per week.
Okay, yeah. But then obviously you're giving those guys stuff to do throughout the week, homework wise, so they'll be pretty busy throughout the week, I'd imagine. Yeah.
They get about 20 hours of homework per week.
Right. Yeah, it seems reasonable. Yeah. So yeah, you're getting the 8 weeks. Yeah. I mean, that does seem very reasonable. Definitely, it's definitely a better alternative method because I know we had this talk long ago about bricks and mortar school versus online, and I think not everybody can learn online, right? Some people need that one-to-one, like sitting in front of somebody. This is how you do this thing, and then replicating that. So I think
without a doubt.
definitely good that those things still exist. People kind of had this talk that like, oh yeah, since Learn Squared came out and all these other things, would schools, brick and mortar schools, be going away? And I don't think that's the case. I think there's still a need for schools. And Scott said the same. Scott was talking about like Art Centre and stuff, and he says you definitely could learn online. I'm not saying you couldn't, but I definitely feel there is a type of student out there who would want to learn in a classroom setting with other people.
It's definitely different too. Like my online teaching is so much different than the way I teach in person. When I teach in person, I kind of go in with like a really, really loose outline of what I'm going to do, but we take so many turns based on student questions. So I kind of run it where it's like a Q&A, and then we'll go in all these different directions based on one topic.
Yep.
And that is not something that I would ever do when I'm teaching online, because it doesn't work that way. When I'm sitting down or editing or when I'm writing out a script, it's impossible to come out with something that organic.
Of course.
Yeah. So there's always a benefit to teaching in person, and it's pretty awesome. It's like I said, definitely different, and I feel like the students get a lot more out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm 100% with you. Like, you can definitely have those conversations when somebody's sitting right in front of you. You can dive into something organically, like you said, in a conversation, like, oh, how would you approach this? Or talking about that, how would you also approach this? And yeah, when you're structured like that with pre-recorded stuff, especially, it's not like you can stop the recorder and ask somebody a question. You're just listening to something you've already talked about, you've put down on tape, and then the guys are trying to take it in word by word. But yeah, I definitely think there's a variation of having two types of schools, because everybody learns differently, and I think that's one of the most important things to learn is how you learn. Because I know people have said like, I cannot learn with books and text, like it's just impossible for me. Whereas listening to somebody talk or watching a video definitely is something I can take. Or the polar opposite, like people are like, people who watch videos are like, it's too sporadic, it's too all over the place, I can't focus. Whereas with a book, they can go line by line, and that's easier for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely feel that's apart from style, that's one of the key things with an artist, I think, especially if you're younger, is finding how you learn. I think it's one of the most important things for artists.
Oddly enough, I would never learn with videos.
Okay, you're more textbooks. Yeah.
Yep, I wouldn't watch my videos to learn. That is a indictment of all my videos. No, but apparently they help some people. But
Yeah.
I personally just don't learn that way.
Yeah. Do you think that comes from your medical training background? Like you find textbooks easier to use or learn from, or is that just a thing in general?
No, I think it does come back, because I was always kind of a very school oriented person, and I would always just learn by reading the textbook, and just I kind of just would teach myself. Yeah, I think with going to undergrad for biochemistry and everything, the teachers a lot of times wouldn't cover all the topics that they needed to, so you had to get really good at learning from the text. So yeah, I usually just learn that way, reading books.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, I'm happy. I've had a great talk.
Yeah, man.
Hopefully you've had the same. And yeah, like I'm hoping we can maybe do this again sometime, and we get you back on further down, and we can talk more about different ventures you're on or things you're doing outside of that. And yeah, it would be great to see you again. But thank you very much for coming on, James. It has been awesome talking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, I loved it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, no worries at all. And to the audience, thanks for staying with us, even though we talked about metal for about 20 minutes. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see any more James, I will leave all the links below in the description. You guys can check us out on iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you find podcast services. And yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. And yeah, that's us out. Thanks very much again to James for coming on, and we'll see you guys later.